Hello, my name is Linda Abraham, and I'm the president of Accepted and the moderator for today's webinar. So I'd like to start this webinar off by inviting you to start writing the questions you'd like answered in the question window. I've prepared a few questions that we'll ask Christy, Cindy, and Esmeralda shortly, but obviously I want to address as many of your questions as possible. So please, again, start typing your questions into the question window. I want to welcome all of you to the 2020 Round 2 MBA Ask Me Anything. While you're typing those questions into the question window, I'd like to introduce our panelists. The first question is actually one I have for you, and you can respond preferably in the chat window. If you want to go to business school in order to pursue your dream career, please type accepted into the chat. Again, if you want to go to business school to pursue your dream career, please type accepted into the chat. Okay, well, you're here for the right reasons. Keep typing, okay. Okay, great. Okay, good, you're here for the right reasons. Today is gonna be a Q&A, there are no slides, and we have just 2 rules of the road today. Please use the question window for your questions and the chat window for your answers to any questions we may ask. When you leave, you will receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. We value your feedback and we definitely use it. And let's see, Cindy and well, let me introduce the participants. And I think for some reason you should be able to turn on your cameras. I don't know. Let's see if we can get those on. And let's see. Okay, I'm going to make you all co-hosts, which should make you be able to use your cameras. If that doesn't work, you'll have only my lovely face to look at. Okay. And yeah, there we go. It's Christy, we're seeing you. Okay, great. Okay. Again, please type your questions into the question window. Finally, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest experts, Esmeralda Cardenal, Christie St-John, and Cindy Tokumitsu, and you can now see all of them, so it worked. Let me just tell you a little bit about each, okay? Before joining Accepted in 2015, Esmeralda Cardenal served as the Associate Director of Admissions at Yale School of Management, the Director of Admissions at Michigan State Broad's MBA program. She too has had clients accepted to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and elite MBA programs in the US and Europe. Dr. Christie St-John is a recent addition to Accepted staff, but a much-loved veteran in international and MBA admissions. She began her career in higher ed as Director of International Admissions at Vanderbilt, then moved to Dartmouth Tuck, where she was a Senior Associate Director of Admissions for 10 years, and then back to Vanderbilt, where she was a Director of MBA Recruiting and Admissions for the Owen School of Management for another 7.5 years. Cindy Tokumitsu has almost been doing this work as long as I have. She joined Accepted in 1998 and has focused on regular and executive MBA admissions. Her clients have been accepted to all the top full-time MBA, executive MBA programs, and the Sloan Fellows and Stanford MSX programs. Now, as you all know, this is not news. 2020 has been a crazy, turbulent, tumultuous year, a difficult year. And many will say, thank God it's coming to an end. But right around the corner, right after the holidays, loom the round 2 deadlines. All reports and indications are that applications surged during the last application round of 2019-2020, and that the surge has continued into the 2021 cycle. Under much calmer circumstances, MBA applicants have questions, MBA applicants have stress, and we're holding this AMA, this Ask Me Anything, to answer your questions, reduce your stress, and improve your chances of acceptance, while also demonstrating the expertise and insight that will make you say, I want them, in other words, these 3 ladies, in my corner, helping me on an individual basis to apply to business school. So first, I have a poll for you. Give me 1 second. And here we go. How many of you are applying this cycle? In other words, 2020, 2021, next cycle, or sometime in the future, or you're not sure if you're applying at all. If you could please respond to the poll, I would greatly appreciate it. Okay. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, with 88% having voted. So here are the results. Okay, 67% are applying this cycle, 27% are applying next cycle, and 7% are applying sometime in the future, and everybody is planning to apply. So nobody checked the not sure if or when applying button. Okay. I actually thought there'd be slightly more applying this cycle, but you're all welcome. And for those planning for the future, congratulations on starting the process earlier. It makes an enormous difference. Okay. So let's see, you have some questions here. But I would like to start with a question that I think has to be addressed. And I'd like to address it to all three of the consultants who are here. How do you suggest applicants deal with the surge in applications this cycle? I'm not talking about COVID now, I'm talking about application volume. Christie, why don't you start?
Well, as you know, I'm still in touch with a lot of admissions directors that I've worked with over the past 25 years. And in calls and discussions with them, they are all reporting increase in applications. So even out of the top 10 schools down as far as the top 50 schools, applications are up. So I think that candidates are going to have to think about applying to A, more schools, and B, not just the top 10 schools. You're going to have to widen your search, and you're going to have to make as strong an application as you possibly can, because the excuse of, I'm sorry, but I'm not a good test taker, but I can assure you I'll do well in your program, is not going to fly this year, at least from what I'm hearing. I don't know, Cindy and Esmeralda, you may have different ideas on that because you've seen more candidates going through on this side of the fence than I have.
Okay. Cindy, you want to take the next one?
Sure,
or
I think,
just to share your comments. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I totally agree with Christie, and so that's the kind of macro level, broader strategy aspect of it. I think on the more particularized school related strategy, that means being careful to spend your time. You have a limited amount of time, so really focus on where you have not just a chance, but aside from statistically having a chance, where you really fit in, where you can really identify and discuss fit with a particular school. It's really going to matter all the more that you show knowledge of and deep interest in the program and link that to your own plans. And that's just, I think that rather than doing a lot of just sort of generic applications, really honing in and that on those factors are going to be so important and increase your chances.
Esmeralda?
This time reminds me when I was working at Yale when 9/11 happened, and we started seeing a surge in applications as well. And I remember there were lots of candidates that they had all the stats, they would have been admitted, without even a question. And this time they were getting waitlisted by us because we just couldn't accept that many, of course, So the programs are being more selective. And one thing that in the admissions committee we looked at is the level of impact. So your essays, even if you have that GPA and the GMAT score, your essays are going to be extremely important, because not before you could have just said your goals and whatever, but they're going to be taking it, one step further in terms of what level of impact have you made, what have you done during this time in the world, what happened, all those things that maybe before didn't really matter because you had that 3.7 GPA or because you had that 750. Now I think it's going to be very important. So be very careful and very sure that your essays are perfect, I would say. And also, if you have 3 rich schools, maybe it's time to kind of add a few where you have kind of a more realistic chance. It would be great for you as well, but so that you can get an admission offer at the end.
I'd like to add one thing that actually we were discussing this internally, and Jennifer Bloom suggested also that you make sure to attend the virtual school events to demonstrate your interest in the program. That is tracked.
Mhm.
And if you never show up at an event, even if you're quote unquote competitive and you have great essays, they don't want their yield to go down. They don't want the percentage of accepted students who are offered a spot to go down. So demonstrated interest is also a factor, and it will improve your essays, no question, because you'll have greater insight into the school. So that's another point I want to raise. All right, let's get to your questions. I have another question I'm going to ask later, but let's start getting to our attendees' questions. This actually this is my other question. I'm going to take Fabian's question. How to consider the test waiver when I'm targeting a tech position post MBA? Okay, so I'll tell you what, Esmeralda, why don't you start with this one?
How can you repeat it? How you consider the test waiver?
Right, I'm going to paraphrase Fabian's question. Should they go for a test waiver if they're considering a tech position post MBA?
Yes.
Well, should they go for a test waiver, period?
I mean, I've had some of my clients that are going for a test waiver, and I'll tell you why. I think if you're going for a tech MBA, of course, they want to see your quantitative background and knowledge. I would only go for it if ideally what you want to demonstrate is you have a high GPA, especially on quantitative courses, that you have some linear algebras and you have some calculus there and advanced calculus there. You also should demonstrate that you have some work experience where you have been able to apply your technical skills. And so if you have those two, then you probably could go for the waiver. But again, you have to have those two very high. If you don't, it's a little risky, I would say, in this time, because they're going to be because of the search. But then you have to have those two. Also, if you have like some programming languages or other courses, for example, then you could demonstrate. Then yes, you have all what it takes to go for the waiver.
Cindy?
I agree. I think it's the idea is to take a holistic look at your own application. And, so along with what Esme said, I totally agree with all of that. If you have really strong GPA or or very strong quantitative technical coursework or relevant, very strong career experiences that demonstrate some of these skills, and maybe you're not the best test taker, or it's a risk, or it'll take a lot of time to study, well, maybe there's a better way you can use your time. But you have to take a look at your own application and see where are the strengths, and if there are any gaps in any of those areas, then it will be risky. And so there's really, I don't think, a formula, but each person has to do take that close look and that holistic look at their own presentation and what they're bringing to the table.
Great. And Christie?
No, I would agree, because but the only caveat is that if you don't have any quant or very little quant, and your job is not really quant related, you really should take one of the tests, because they're going to be afraid that you won't be able to do the work in the program. And you might think, well, that's not for you to decide. That's for me to show you that I can do it when I get there, but that's not how it works. And if you don't have any quant, you really need to take a test to show them that you can do the work and study, and you'll be able to do it. You can prove it, because and if you're going into consulting and iBanking, I would do it as well.
I have one more thing to add. A lot of the schools are providing a list of qualifications or things requirements that you need to kind of have in order to get the waiver. So the more of those qualifications you can comply with, the more that you can have, the better your chances. So for example, if you have the years of work experience and you have the GPA, but you don't have the other courses or the different projects they ask or the research experience or whatever, then the chances are less than if you had. For example, I had a client that out of all the 5 or 6 requirements that UVA Darden had, he had actually out of 7, he had 6. He complied with the 6. So so he got the waiver. I have another one who only complied with 3 of them. One of them was a strong GPA, and he didn't get the waiver. So you kind of get the idea, the more that you can provide, the more evidence, the higher the chances of you getting the waiver.
Paulina is asking, but given the increase in applications, would the waiver weigh negatively? Anybody have a thought on that?
It hasn't seemed to, from the people I've talked with, again, they're looking at the scores if you submit them, but if you have written to them and said, hey, this is what I've got, and they have waived it, that's because they believe you can do the work. So it should not impact you at all, either scholarship-wise or admission-wise.
I think this is a hand that the schools are providing, because they know the challenges that exist right now with, online testing, with going to the test centers and all those things. So I would say, and I have had clients that had, strong scores, and the other ones or those that don't have so strong scores. And what I always tell them is, if their score is within the average, closely to the range that the schools accept, then go for it. Accept it. If it's maybe you wanted to retake the test and you couldn't, then that's what the optional essay is for, but you're still within the range. If your score falls outside the range and you believe that presenting that score is going to affect your chances of admission, then that's the waiver. Use the waiver to do that, especially if you have other things to show, and that will be your great chance. If there is a year, I think, when you have that option, might be this one. I don't think next year you're gonna have that option.
True.
Yeah, probably, hopefully, right?
All right. I would say if they grant you the waiver, then they're accepted, that they feel that you can do the work. If they don't grant you the waiver, you better do well on that test score.
Exactly.
Okay. I do think that, and there's another question here, which I'll tell you what, since we're on this topic, we'll take this question now. This is from Malay, and I apologize if I mispronounce the name here. If admissions are more competitive in this cycle, what can we do to get admission with a scholarship? Okay, Cindy, you want to start with this one?
I think you have to be realistic. One main thing you can do is to target lower schools that are, say, on par for you, or even a little bit lower. Make sure that the school, of course, any school you apply to meets your needs. But there are a lot of great schools that aren't, top 10, even top 15, that if you show that you're sort of slightly, say, above their average applicant, then the more that's the case, then the more likely you are to get some funding.
Christie, Esme, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Cindy said, because the scholarships are going to be tight this year because a lot of school endowments have suffered because of COVID. And so they're going to be a little bit tighter with some of the scholarships, but they still want to get the best class they can. So if you are above the averages of a given school, your chances of getting scholarships are pretty good. But do be careful and make sure this school, as Cindy said, make sure it's the right fit for you. Look at their employment reports, make sure the kinds of companies you want are recruiting there, make sure they have the courses that you need to get where you want to go. Because you can get a very, very good, solid education from any of the top 100 or even 200 schools. They wouldn't, considering there are 5,000 MBA programs out there in the world, to be in the top 200 is pretty good.
Okay. Esme, you want to add anything here?
I think they said it.
Right. I always say, if you want to get a scholarship, you have to be somehow making the school look good. So whether that's by raising the GPA average, adding a diversity element, or raising their GMAT or GRE average, you have to make the school look good. Give them some additional benefit to your being there. And so that way they'll cut the price. I think it's a very...
Your career potential is also a big factor that's weighed.
Okay, good to know, good to know. All right, let's see what we have here. Lots of different questions. We have from anonymous attendee a question. And this question is, generally, how long does it take to pay back the loan for the MBA? particularly in the UK, like Oxford or Cambridge? I'm not sure we can answer it specifically for the UK, but Esmeralda, I know you worked in the UK at one point, so maybe you want to take that question first.
How long does it take? It really depends on how much you take and how much you can pay monthly and the type of salary that you earn post graduation. So it is highly variable. I would say it's something that also depends on the country you're from, because some programs do have that flexibility with the UK. The good thing about the UK is that you can find some really great programs for international students and flexibility. So try to do that. It's all quite a question of finances and how much it is, with any loans, how much you're going to be paying and how long it's going to take. I think that, of course, with some of the schools, the higher you go in the rankings or how the position of the school is in the industry, where you're going to be working at, the fastest you can get the return on investment of your investment. So it's something, but what like Christie has said is very, very important is check the employment reports and see if the companies that you're targeting recruit there, and so that employment is going to be easier, and that way you're going to be able to pay off that MBA a lot quicker.
Okay. Christie, Cindy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think we
Okay.
I
covered.
don't actually. So,
Okay.
thank you, Esme.
All right. This is also from an anonymous attendee. When it comes to the GRE scores for U.S. business school admissions, do admissions committees compare submitted GRE scores against their published GRE averages, or do they convert the GRE scores to the corresponding GMAT equivalent? This question is for USB schools only. This is also from an anonymous attendee. Christy, you want to take that?
We always converted it to what the estimated GMAT score would be. And I believe most schools are using the comparison chart. It doesn't always work that way, because I've seen some with much lower GRE scores get in than you would think, because they had other aspects of their application that were very strong, like excellent work experience or a very strong undergrad GPA with plenty of quant courses. But that's generally what happens.
Okay. SB, Cindy, do you want to add to that?
I think that's, I mean, I think adcoms are getting more and more comfortable over the years now with the GRE. So I think that they're more just looking at it on its own. So I found it interesting that Christy said that they were still converting a lot. But it seems to me that it's just that the proportion is quite huge, quite large now. So
yeah, I think that I feel the same thing, that I think they're getting more and more comfortable with the scores. They know, for example, that a 163 in quant and 163 in verbal usually kind of about what's going to convert to what their average GMAT is. In the schools, because a lot more people are taking the GRE, the schools are being a little bit more selective with that, now, because they are able to do that. You can see that some of the schools are now posting the GRE averages. Well, before that wasn't the case. So use that into kind of find out the ballpark and where you are, but again, so it is
right. You can see it in some rankings now as well, even
Yeah.
the GRE and the GMAT. So
Right.
The majority of scores are still coming through with the GMAT. And then again, you also have the executive assessment that's being accepted by some schools now. So that is a third tier of scores.
right.
So I think it's all going to become very confused and hopefully irrelevant in the future.
Okay. All right, got some other good questions here. This is also from an anonymous attendee. I only have one chance to take the GRE/GMAT before the round 2 deadline. If my score is average or below average, can I write in the optional essay that I will retake it and resubmit scores with the school in the spring, if allowed?
I think I can answer that question because I have 3 clients in the same boat. This is what I told them. I told them that there are some schools that would allow you to send a new score up to 3 weeks after you sent it, that they would hold on. One of those schools is LBS. Another school like that is Berkeley. They would wait for you, and they have said that up to 3 weeks. After that, then you're running the risk that your application is going to be evaluated with the score that you sent. I would say another thing is you should be taking practice tests. I tell my clients to take them weekly, and so that you should know kind of a ballpark where you are. So if you know that you are scoring 650 and 650, 640, 650, 660, that pretty much you might be getting like a 640 at the end. You know, think about they got 20 points, 10 to 20 points, and that would probably be your final score if you have been consistently scoring that in practice. So what do? Start writing that optional essay. So you don't have to write it, draft it the day before. Start writing it and have it there. Have that paragraph. Like I have some of my clients and I put it in gray so they know that we're going to put it in black once it's ready to go. Have that in. And so have that optional. Don't go blindsided into the GMAT or the GRE score the day of the test. You should have a ballpark view of how that is so there is no surprises. And the other thing I told a client is, if for example working through the holidays in your GMAT would make sense and you want to push that score, like let's say to 7 days before, because online you're going to get your score 7 days before, then do that. You know, whatever you feel that is going to increase your chances, but have that optional S ready and take practice that you don't want any surprises.
Okay. Anything else?
I think you do need to check with the schools though, because I also had a
Yeah.
client who was asking that and the school said, nope, we don't have time to
Each
go
school is
back and
different. Yeah, some schools say yes, and some schools say whatever you send us on the day of the deadline. That's otherwise your application is going to be moved automatically to the third round. So you definitely want to check.
yeah.
And some schools say they have a policy of not doing that, but if they're really interested in you, if they see something in the application, that they'll still do it. So you just,
Yeah.
you go with the best information that you have. And I think another thing is if you think there's a chance that you're not going to achieve a score, I mean, have maybe some plan B for applications too. If
Yeah.
you don't have, if there's a chance you may not get a certain score.
Let's see. So Jeanette writes, I'm in a country where internet is very limited / censored. I've been finding some resources to study for the GMAT, but it has been challenging, so I'm terrified. Is there anything I can do to supplement my GMAT scores? I'm worried that with slow internet and my limited resources, I just won't be able to reach B school medians. Okay, let's see. Who wants to tackle that one first?
I mean,
Go ahead.
I'll jump in. Just you do the best you can with the resources you have. That's a general principle that I would tell anyone, whatever their situation. You've already made, I think, the really important first step. If you've evaluated, here's the situation that exists in your case. So you make a plan for schools based on what you think. Realistically, don't spend time bemoaning the situation. It's not an ideal situation, and I feel for you in that case, but that's the situation that you have. So look at schools that you feel will still meet your needs, and have a range of schools so that when you see how you do, you'll be ready to apply to maybe this range of schools or that range of schools when you see what your actual test is. And just literally, it's precious time. That is one resource that you do have to some extent. So make the most of it starting now.
Great answer, Cindy. Christie, Esmeralda, do you have anything to add? Go ahead, Christie.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have access to an Education USA office in your country, they often have classes for the GMAT, the GRE, or at least they have materials there. And you might even be able to use the internet in their offices instead of at home. I can't guarantee that because I don't know where you are, but they have offices all over the world in, tiny countries. So Education USA is certainly a resource. They've got a huge website. You can find out whether they have an office in your area or not.
A great idea. Asby, anything to add?
No, I think I agree with them.
The only thing I wanted to add is, again, we don't know what country you're in, but if you're in a country that sends very few students to top MBA programs, the median or meeting the median may not be quite as critical as long as you have other evidence that you can do the work, okay? So again, the only way to find out is to apply, to take the GMAT and to apply with whatever score you get. Study as hard as you can with the resources that you have, as both Christie and Cindy have said. But there might be a little bit more leeway for you if you are from a country that doesn't send many students to top business schools. Okay.
Great point.
Okay. Here's a question from Xiao Jing. And again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. What is your view on how schools look at the GRE versus the GMAT? Esme, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, they used to prefer the GMAT because admissions committees were more comfortable with the GMAT. They could read it better. But every year they opened up to the GRE because they felt that I was still in admissions then. They felt that a lot of them, they were losing a lot of a lot of applicants because they were going to other graduate school programs because the GMAT was only for business school. So once they started opening for the GRE, little by little every year, there has been an increase in GRE test takers. And so this now admissions has been able to read better the GRE. They kind of know what to expect. So they really tell you there is no preference. So there are some industries where it may be preferable that you have a GMAT. For example, if you want to go into investment banking, just because the recruiters, many of the recruiters do know the GMAT better. They are themselves MBAs who took the GMAT, and they will be asking for those GMAT scores. So depending on the sector or the industry you're going to be working on, then maybe there is a little bit of a preference for the GMAT. Like I would say banking is one of them. I think consulting is another one. But for the most part, there's going to be no preference. And my advice, and I think that the admissions will tell you, is present the test score where you think you're going to score strongest at. So if you think that you're doing better on the GRE, by no means don't switch gears at this late in the game for a GMAT. Present the GRE. You're going to have a higher chance of admission with that test than if you present something else.
Anybody want to add to Esme's answer?
That says it to
Yeah.
me. So.
Yep, I don't need to add either. Great answer, thank you. All right, Pratik asks, how to compensate for a lower GPA in grad school for a technical degree, considering GPA was good in undergrad for the same major? How much weightage is put on GPA if applicants have another master's technical? So Pratik, if you could just answer the chat window, are you saying you have 2 graduate degrees? You're very welcome, Xiaojing. Tell you what, while he's answering my question, I'm going to pose another question from John. Do military veteran applicants compete against the entire applicant pool or against each other? Is there a certain percentage of the class size that is reserved for veterans or diversity applicants? Tell you what, Christie, I know military is you're very close to your heart. Why don't you take that question or start?
Most schools will have a cap, but it's not a very low cap. They've discovered over the years that military applicants get jobs. They do the work regardless of their test scores. They're disciplined enough to get the work done. They were always my favorite candidates, but that's beside the point. You do compete with the entire pool, however, just as every applicant does, regardless of where you're coming from, your background and all that. But again, I think that given the kind of work experience that military applicants come in with, having managed thousands and thousands of troops and millions of dollars worth of material, you might get a pass on the GMAT scores or the GRE scores and that sort of thing. And certainly if you're an academy grad, you're not going to be held to the highest of the GPA standards because the academies don't inflate grades like all the other universities do, and schools know that.
Right. Okay. Esmeralda, do you want to add anything? Cindy,
Yes,
want to add anything?
I think
Okay.
that, yeah, and I'm working with several military clients at the moment, and I think that yes, they really admissions. I don't think there is a cap per se. I mean, it's not so many military candidates that come every year for every single school. So I don't think you're going to find a cap. You will be compared with the rest of the application. And I think that being in the military, there are so many things that you can take advantage of and really portray. For example, your teamwork ability, your dedication, your discipline, but also other things that might not be as maybe as evident. So for example, I always tell my military candidates talk about other things that they have done that is not straight military. For example, I have one of them who likes to play the violin. things like that. You want to, so they can see that you're also well-rounded, that you're not, and things. So they are, but for the most part, I have found that admissions committee really love to see military applicants, they that value. And there are some things that they would say, yes, you would get they would be a little bit more forgiving in some of the things because of the training that you are coming from.
Well, if I could add one thing, what I meant by a cap was not necessarily the number admitted, but they may have a cap on if you're a yellow ribbon qualified, they may have a cap on the number of yellow ribbon awards that they will give out just because of scholarship financial constraints. But so that's something to keep in the back of your mind.
Okay, John, thank you very much for the great question. Now let's go back to critiques because I got a little bit more detail here. How to compensate for lower GPA in grad school for a technical degree, considering GPA was good in undergrad for the same major. He just had one master's, and that's where the grades dropped a bit. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Esme. Go
I could
ahead.
answer. I think that you could always mention in the optional essay what happened. I actually think that your undergraduate GPA is weighed a little bit heavier than the graduate, just because it's 4 years, and also because graduate, it's all range of, sometimes it's easier to pass and things like that in the graduate school. That's kind of a general belief. So they will be weighing more the undergraduate. If you have a low graduate program, graduate GPA, however, I think that you should be using the optional essay to say why. Maybe you were working full time and you were taking care of a family, for example, or something like that. They will want to know why, but I don't think that, especially if your GPA from an undergrad is strong, I don't think you have too much to worry about.
Anybody want to add?
I agree with that. And just, just clarifying why it's also low, like low is a big range. So,
Right.
If it's a little low or if it's very low, it would take a little bit of a different approach. I wouldn't, if it's just slightly low, or then I just think mention it in an optional, but don't over, dramatize it. But if it's very low, I do think you have to take a little more serious tone and just say, look, here's what happened.
I agree.
Okay. Good point. Good point.
Just one thing I'll say, if you have a question, I work with a lot of technical MBAs, I can tell you, and all kinds. So if you like, you can email me after this and tell me what your GPA was, and I can tell you how much you can include in the optional. For example, I just had a client this morning who wanted to write a whole optional about his 3.4. I don't think he needs to do that. See, so maybe you think it's low because maybe you got a 4.0, but why don't you email me and tell me, and I can tell you if to include it or not.
Here, I'll post. We can do that in just a second. The only thought that occurred to me, again, along the lines of what Cindy and as we have both said, is that I've many times said, a downward trend in GPA, now talking undergrad, is a negative. Okay, so and that's one of the issues when you have a graduate GPA lower than an undergraduate one. Well, then there's a drop. Is there a trend? So somebody wrote me very seriously that he started out his freshman year with a 3.9 and finished up on his undergrad with a 3.8. Does he have to explain it? And yeah, you're all laughing, right? And I said, no, that's not a downward trend. That's a fluctuation. Okay. So, when you talk about, again, if you're undergraduate, the thing is that usually graduate GPAs go up, they don't go down. So it's maybe a little bit more justified to provide context for what happened, for why it went down. But do keep in mind that there's a difference between a fluctuation and a trend, all right, whether it's up or down. Okay. And I'm going to post also the ways that you can contact Esmeralda, Cindy, and Christie. Just give me a second as we keep going. All right, let me post another question, and then I'll do that. Gillen asked, how much should you focus on non-work extracurricular activities, political campaign, volunteer work in professional groups, versus just work accomplishments? That's a good question. It may also be kind of hard to answer, but I'll tell you what. Who wants to start with that one? Anybody want to start, or should I pick?
I can jump in.
Okay, Cindy, go ahead.
Cindy. Yeah, so I really think, and as my clients probably really get sick of hearing from me, it depends, and be totally equivocal all the time. But for most people, it will be important, but somewhat marginal. It's not going to be the make or break often, but there are times when someone has something particularly meaningful or incredibly impactful, or it's just been such a central part of who they are in their life that it makes sense giving more emphasis to. I think the way to answer that for yourself is to look at your whole candidacy, evaluate your candidacy, your strengths, any potential weaknesses, and just how that fits into the picture. I think almost certainly it would be something, if it's important, to bring in some way. It also may vary application to application. They will give you each application will give you a different opportunity to present different facets of your profile in a sense, and so kind of go with the flow a little bit. And some schools may seem to be more interested in that type of activity than others. Don't make it just formulaic.
Okay, Christy, Esme, you have anything to add there?
Well, I was going to put my admissions hat on and say that from an admissions point of view, the reason that we would look for that extracurricular activities is because we want a well-rounded applicant. We want somebody who's going to be engaged in the program with clubs, with classmates, with whatever it might be. But that said, it doesn't mean we want to see 15 different things listed because, with a day each. That's not involvement, really. That's just filling up your resume with something. What we appreciate.
And you can tell the difference.
Well,
and you can tell the difference.
Yes, absolutely. But actually they put their dates on there too, which gives it a lot away. But you think, how can you possibly be working at this job that you need to work 80 hours a week at and doing 15 different volunteer activities? I don't think so. So what we want to see that you're involved in something outside of just work and academics. And a lot of times young professionals who are working, especially in consulting and investment banking, where you've got a lot of hours and you don't really have time or energy, perhaps, to pursue social or community activities, we would go back and look at what did you do in college? Because if you were involved in things in college, we would think, okay, you probably will be involved here.
Okay, great. I also would say look at the questions that are posed. That's also a good indication.
Because not every
something that Linda has said a lot that it has stayed with me in her webinar. She says that don't look at the essays as the kitchen sink,
right?
Or anything in the application for that matter. So don't feel like you have to list every possible club or activity you've been in part of. So just because then it looks a little bit, you run the risk of sounding like you lack focus, and at the same time, you don't want to list one thing and then run the risk of sounding like a just one trick pony. So it's kind of a fine line to find how much do you list. So you don't want to list things that happened, 10 years ago either, how much and for what question, for what essay, and kind of ideally what you want to bring is a nice balance in the application where different essays and different parts of the application tell a different story about yourself so they can see a whole picture. So be careful on where you mention that you do show jumping, for example, and where you say you're a singer and then do, a whiskey collector. I got one, remember, and things like that. And where do you show all those things so that it presents a kind of a nice, focused, well-rounded application?
Great advice. All right, so let's see. Malaya is asking if I'm interviewed by a current student, should I connect with him on LinkedIn? If yes, when, i.e. before or after the interview? Any opinion on that one? Esme?
I would say it doesn't hurt to ask them to connect with them because they have the choice of accepting or not, that invitation. So I would say that I I would be respectful and not engage in conversations before that. I would wait for the interview. Let them, after that, say, you know, because a lot of my clients, they go in and invite their interviewers on LinkedIn, and that way they can look at their profiles and see, and that is fine, you know, and they might or might not accept you. That's fine, you know. But then in the interview, they may welcome, you know, say, hey, if you have other questions or whatever, in which case you can use that, you know, as an opportunity to connect with them after. But I would be respectful of their time. They are spending that time, they're giving that time to the university. I wouldn't, you know, go overboard and try to contact them, because they might just find that you are kind of, that is uncalled for, that is not maybe appropriate at that time. So I would just wait after.
Okay. Anybody want to add to that? No? Okay. All right. Well, one thing I think that you can do before an interview is not so much connect with the person on LinkedIn, but review the profile to find some commonality with the person, something that you share. You might see that the person has an interest in skiing and you're an avid skier or hiker or a classical musician or whatever it could be. That can be nice to know if you want to make a connection with somebody. And obviously that's part of the point of the interview. Okay. Let's see. Anushka's asking, in what situations would you not need to write an optional essay? If you prefer to answer when you should write the optional, that's okay with me, but the question is when you should not write the optional.
When you don't have anything else to add.
Yeah,
That's a good rule.
yeah,
I mean, it really is optional, because consider that if a school gets, let's say, an average of 1,000 applications, and they have 3 essay questions, that's 3,000 essays they've got to read. And an optional really does mean optional.
I would say it also depends on the question on the optional.
Yes.
Some optionals say only use this essay to explain, you know, gaps in your work experience and, you know, low scores or something. Then they actually telling you if you're not talking about those things, don't even think about it. Other schools, they just say write that or anything you would like to tell the admissions committee. For those people, I always tell them, write something. What else can you tell them? Maybe there is an experience that you do outside the office. Maybe there is a mentorship program or something else they haven't seen and they wouldn't see from just looking at your application. So that's what I usually tell them. But if you're in that category where everything fits, there's nothing to explain, and the school says only write this option for this and this, then I think the answer is made for you and there is no need to write that is.
Okay.
agree, 100%.
All right. And we have a couple more questions here. Are there anything we should look out for? This is from an anonymous attendee. Look out for or consider on an application when considering applying to dual degree programs, for example, an MBA JD. Now, Cindy, I know you've worked with a lot of MBA JDs.
Yeah, so I would say you really should, if you're checking that box that you're applying for the joint degree, it's going to be two things I would say is when you're describing your goals, make sure that they're not going to be, you know, you'll be evaluated separately for both programs, but you have to, they'll always evaluate your goals anyway. In this case, say for the MBA portion, they'll be evaluating your goals and seeing that you're checking that off. So it needs to make sense in their eyes that you don't have to make it all about why you need also the JD, but just specify goals that make sense for that. And then also, you know, if they're looking at your academic record, again, they won't be evaluating it if it's the MBA side from the JD side, but if it's totally like out of sync with what any reasonable person would think a JD admission committee would accept, then I think you have to also, like, you have to just have it synchronized, I would say pretty well, and you know, realize that it just all has to come together for that purpose, just like any other application, really. It's just that this one has that slant to it.
You have to qualify for both programs.
Mhm.
Christy,
Right.
Esme, do you want to add anything?
No, I think Cindy
Set
was
it off.
exactly right. It's each program's going to judge you according to their standards, and you need to have a cohesive application as to why you're doing both.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so we have a question here from Gary. How do B schools value entrepreneurs with an established enterprise and clear career development? But I want to study for the MBA to expand my network and improve management skills. Okay, Esme, you want to start with that one?
How B schools?
B schools, not a specific one. How do B schools value entrepreneurs?
No, business schools, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they really value them. You know, there are so many qualities that come from entrepreneurs, and what they would be definitely seeing is, you know, your essays have to really tell the story of why you did that, and kind of how I'm working right now with a client that she started her own business, and I keep asking, you know, what drove you to do that, and what is the state of the company, and what do you plan to do? She will have to write a little statement in terms of who is going to be looking after the company while she's a business school. So I think they would love that, but they need to have information to know that this is just not something that happened out of the garage, and it is like a one employee business, but it's something really that has, so that they would be wondering, because it is, a lot of people have startups and a lot of people have their own business, and because they don't have that information that they would had you worked for an established company, then you need to give them more information. But once you do that and they see that what you've done, I think they're going to value it greatly, because you bring a lot of different skills to the program because of that.
I would say, if I can just add one thing, I have worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I find that there's a little bit of a sense of kind of the word entrepreneur is kind of like this magic potion that's going to bestow interest on an application. And I think, you know, you should use it, but don't be careful not to let it become a crutch. Don't just say entrepreneur, startup, you know, talk about the industry you're in, talk about what you are doing, what the market you're serving. That's really the thing that should be driving a lot of that goals discussion and experience discussion beyond just the fact of entrepreneurship.
I would agree with that. And I think that, Esme, what you said about making sure that they know who's going to be taking care of that company while you're in school, because B school takes up an exceptionally large amount of your day and night, and something's going to suffer if you're trying to run your own company and do all the coursework and recruiting and club activities and things that are going on in B school. So make sure that that is clear.
Okay. We have a question here from an anonymous attendee. As a healthcare worker, COVID significantly impacted me psychologically, and therefore my performance preparing for grad school. Can I share that briefly on the optional essay? I don't want to be inappropriate or seem whiny. I'm also going to share a link that a podcast that I did in which I discussed how to respond to COVID questions. But Christie, you want to start with that one?
I think COVID has affected a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Everybody.
And again, yes, actually everybody in the world. So it's going to depend on the tenor of what you're saying, how you're saying it, so that you don't appear whiny. It just make it a statement of fact. This has happened, but I have overcome it by doing this, or whatever it might be, because you don't want to just say, hey, I'm pitiful, take me in. That's not going to get you anywhere.
I would give examples of what you went through, because this is a world problem, you know, and if you are a healthcare worker, you have seen it a lot closer than how I have, for example. You know, if you've seen, so you need to provide examples, tell the admissions committee why, then they would understand, and they would see that this has been an issue. And I would say, but absolutely, I would definitely, you know, put that in the optional essay, but also not only talk about how you have been able to cope with that, because, you know, so it won't, like what Christie said, so it won't sound like you stayed down there and you would have not been able to get out. Like, how have you been able, what strategies have you used to that, and what are the lessons learned that are going to help you through business school, you know, to go that you've learned, maybe that you're stronger this way, or you've learned X, Y, and Z. But I would say that.
Yeah.
Anybody want to add anything to that? I have something to add. I did recently a podcast. I just posted the link to it on responding to COVID questions, or if you want, shooting an optional. So there's two basic elements to your response, and I'm talking very high level, okay? One is, how were you affected? Now, as a healthcare worker, you were frontline. I don't know if you were a nurse or what exactly position you were playing, but you were frontline, and you saw and experienced things that the four of us haven't seen and experienced. That's what happened to you. That's part one. The second part, and maybe it caused depression or psychological issues or anxiety, whatever. That's part of the story. But the other part is, how did you respond? Okay, so obviously, the psychological element, I don't think we can deal with in this anonymous environment. But did you work extra? Did you start something? Did you initiate something? Again, business schools are very interested in initiative, leadership, organizational ability. So if in response to COVID, you initiated something, did something, how were you an actor in the story as opposed to a passive participant? Okay, those two elements should be part of your discussion of how COVID affected you. Okay. Anyway, that's my take. Okay, so thank you for the question, and I hope you're doing okay now. Let's see. John asked. John was the military applicant we talked to a minute ago. Follow-up question: do schools read the optional essay and truly consider the applicant's entire story? I have a very low undergrad GPA, just under 3.0, with an epic story, but I did do well on both the GMAT and GRE and got a 3.7 plus GPA in a master's program. Will schools forgive the GPA if they believe I can do the work?
I think I can answer that. I think
Go for
you need to they definitely read the optional essay. They read all the essays, and I think you need to provide an explanation for that GPA in the. I think that the fact that you have a great graduate GPA and your GMAT score is really good, is really a big plus for your admission. But they will be having that question mark as to what happened in undergraduate, and they won't know unless you tell them. And I would say this is the part. Sorry?
I say context.
Yes, they know. I right now I'm working with a candidate that he said it is personal. I don't feel like sharing. But the problem is, if you don't tell them, what they're going to assume is that you were careless. That you maybe were committing too many things and whatever, and then they're going to be wondering, how is he going to perform in business school? So unless you tell them, they won't know. And I would say that's a good thing. To maybe definitely write the optional, explain what happened.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Esme. You don't want admissions people making up stories about, why didn't he talk about that? This is the elephant in the room. And you don't have to go into a lot of personal details either. If something happened as far as your family or an illness, you just have to say that I was very ill and missed classes, and that's why my GPA was not very good then. If you want to talk about it, fine, but you don't have to give them too much information on it. But you do need to mention it because it's there.
And I've had clients, just to say this, I'm sorry, I've had clients too that they don't have an excuse. They just said they were immature. They didn't focus. They didn't think that their grades were going to matter. Yeah. And I remember one client had that a couple of years ago who did that. She had a 2.9 GPA, and that's what happened. She said, I don't have an excuse. So in this case, what we did in the optional essay, she admitted that. I was focused. I thought that being involved in extracurriculars was going to be more important. I was involved in sports. I didn't pay attention to my grades. After that, then I found out the big mistake I made, and I decided, and then when I went to graduate school, I tried to do things better. As a result, she got like a really high GPA, but she explained that, and it went through, and she's now admitted in one of the M7 schools. So it works. It can work. She explained it, and she said, and proved that now she was mature and had changed, and life went on, and the schools were able to bring her forward.
I think that's the most common reason for a low GPA too.
Very common.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
like people understand that, like not all 18 and 20-year-olds are totally together, you know? So,
Yeah, but the
Most-
combination of admission of guilt and regret, and at the same
Mhm.
time the ability to change, I think is key. That you
Totally.
say yes,
It's not as much an admission of guilt as taking the responsibility.
Taking
it's taking
Yeah.
responsibility.
Exactly.
Yes,
Taking ownership, yeah. Mhm.
taking ownership and saying I changed and this is what I did, and reminding the admissions committee of all the great things that you've done after. I think that it actually at the end they're going to be even thinking better of you than before that, because they will see, oh wow, he had the maturity to accept and also to change
To grow.
and grow. Mhm.
I completely agree with everything that you said. I just want to add one thing because of the competitiveness this year, and that is apply to a range of programs.
Yeah,
Okay, this is a competitive process.
I agree.
So-
I say, yeah, don't just think that that's like, and therefore that just doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It's like, it helps on the margins to have the good explanation, to have a well-written optional, but it doesn't just like kind of take it off the table.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Now we are now at 11:02, and there are still some questions here. Christie, Esmeralda, Cindy, you're doing a great job. Do you have the bandwidth to extend a little bit, or should we bring this to a close?
Uh,
I'm
I
good.
have about 10 more minutes
10
myself, but
minutes.
that doesn't mean you guys can.
Yeah, I can keep going.
I
Right.
have a
Okay.
client in 10 minutes, so
Okay.
I can
All
do
right.
10
So we
more
can go for a little bit longer, and then Esme and Cindy, you should leave when you have to. Christy, I don't know what's your time frame.
I'm good till 2:30.
Okay. Okay. We'll go for a little longer then. Okay. This is from an anonymous attendee. Would taking the GRE over the GMAT have any effect on scholarship opportunities, since GMAT scores are usually highlighted more?
No.
Okay, that's easy. That was a quick one. That's a real quick one. Esme, Cindy?
I agree.
Okay.
I would defer to her anyway. She would know more on that area than me.
Yeah.
All right. This is from Anushka. Can you write about your entrepreneurship startup that is still in the development phase and in the optional essay? Or should you avoid mentioning it all and just focus on your full-time job for work experience criteria?
I
Interesting.
think that it all depends on how important that is for your goals. If your goals in the short term are going back to that startup, expand that startup and work in that, then yes, you need to talk about it. If you are having that on the side, but you really have a full-time job and want to continue with that different industry, then leave that in the resume. So it really depends on the importance that that startup has for you in your careers post MBA, I think.
That's exactly right. Exactly. I'm working with a client now who's got a startup on the side, and he's not sure whether it's going to go or not. And so it's there, it's on the resume, but I don't think that he needs to do anything in the optional about it. He could if he wanted to, but I said, if you get the interview, then maybe you could talk about it there. But if it's not adding anything to your goals, but if it is going to be your goal, then yes, you have to talk about it.
And it could, if it's not really germane overall to the whole picture, it could actually dilute the focus. So so, it has to either be, affirmatively contributing to the application, or like just, it could hurt it. So don't just,
And just to add to Esme, I mean, I completely agree. If you want to say that entrepreneurship is going to be your focus in business school, then you really have to talk about your startup, especially if there's no other entrepreneurial activity until this point. Otherwise, it just seems pie in the sky. Okay. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, baby. Thank you. All right. This question is from an anonymous attendee. I work in the insurance industry. How do these schools view industry designations and certifications? Are they given any weight or viewed as additional work experience dedication to a certain industry? I think it depends on the certification.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's always good to have. It's always good to have professional certifications if they're going to be relevant to what you want to do in the future. you definitely want to show them and mention that in your essay about your goals. Well, these are skills and I have this. If it's something kind of random, put it on your resume, but I wouldn't go into any details about it.
Great.
Agree.
All right.
Agree.
Okay, let's see what else we have here. I've been working for a company for the past 3 years, but I want to change jobs now. So would that be a good idea to do as I am applying in round 1 next year? Or would it show poor planning skills at my end if I have 3 years in one company, about 6 months in another before application? And a follow-up question, given the case, what is the good time to switch jobs? Is it before application or before application and interview? It's a good question.
That's a good question.
Christy, you want to take it? You have this big smile on your face.
It's just because somebody asked me that the other day. We're working through it. If you are at a point where you have hit the ceiling, you can't go anymore, or you just can't stand the job anymore and you need to switch, or especially if you are switching into something that is going to get you to the career path you are seeking through the MBA, you definitely want to do it to get the experience there. You just need to be able to explain to your employer that this is what you plan to do, because schools are going to want to know that you are open and honest and above board by telling your employer, by the way, I'm not going to be here after 6 months because I'm going to be going to business school. Not that
But
what
about if he changes jobs like February 1, then they could, I don't think he can say to his employer.
Yeah, that's not really going to matter, but you should notify the school though, just to let them know.
No, he's applying next year.
He's
This whole
applying.
year. He's applying in the fall.
So
So he's going to be with a new job for a year and a half.
Oh, well, then that's fine.
I had
Yeah.
a client who worked for 3 years at a company, and last January 2020 changed to a different company and applied this past round 1. So it's kind of your case, in this year. And the company she hit the ceiling, so she moved to a different company that provided more opportunities and actually even got it closer to the goals that she would have that she wanted after the MBA.
Mm-hmm.
So that made sense. She discussed that with me early around this time last year, and that made sense because it was something that it would be actually gave her even closer to being admitted than not. So it was fine, it was good, and now she just has a couple of offers. What doesn't make sense is if you're actually moving away from what you want to do post MBA. So it's you're making your life a little harder, even if that means an increase in salary. Because if it's really completely different, let's say you've been in banking and you want to get this consulting gig for 6 months, but you want to go back to banking, what are you going to tell the schools? And you really need to make sense the story why you left. But a lot of people do that. You change jobs. So if there is an offer coming in and it is better for you and it makes sense for you and your goals, take it, take it, absolutely take it. What might happen is you might not be able to provide that letter of recommendation because it would be too recent to provide a letter of recommendation from that new employer, which is fine. The schools would understand that and tell them, I just moved, especially, et cetera, and that would be fine. But absolutely take it if you have that. What you don't want to do is, okay, I'm bored of my job, I hit the ceiling, then I'm going to resign while I look for another job. You don't want to do that because you don't want those gaps in the work experience, especially when the economy is down, and who knows if you're going to be able to get that other job. So if you have that offer, take it.
All right, we have a question here from Avinash. I'm thinking of doing my MBA for the year 2021. I assume that's a cycle. Will I get guidance in essays and resumes and getting into school if you work with us? Yes, you will definitely get that guidance. Again, I just posted and I can post again. The contact info, both here's where you can find information about our services, as well as the contact information for Cindy, Christy, and Esme. So if you want to work with one of them, you can request them, or you can purchase in the shopping cart and request them. But yes, that's exactly the kind of guidance that we give. And, I'll tell you what, I know that Cindy's going to have to leave in a minute. And the same with Esme. I think you have a client, right? There's another question here from anonymous attendee. And when you have to go, ladies, I just want to thank you for your assistance here. I think it's been a wonderful panel. You've done a great job answering everybody's questions. There have been lots of thank yous in the chat window. So let me take this opportunity to thank you now. And we do have more questions that I guess Christie and I will field for a few more minutes. But thank you, Esme and Cindy. I also want
head
to.
off. Thank you and take care, everybody. Good luck.
All right.
With your programs.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you again. Thank you. Bye.
My great pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Now I want to also take a moment, and I want to just thank the applicants for joining us. We will answer more questions. If you would like to work with any of the panelists at Accepted, I've given you the information that will allow you to do that. Some of you may look at our services and say, isn't Accepted expensive? Well, you know what's more expensive? Rejection. And it can be, so let's, the risks of rejection are far more expensive than the risks of working with us. We start at $330 an hour. That's less than having to retake the GMAT or well, actually they're about the same. But as 1 hour of our time, it's a little more than one application fee. And it's a heck of a lot less than the cost of an additional year of pre-MBA earnings. Much, much less than that. Even our packages are much less than that. So every year we work with applicants who talk to us a year earlier. This literally, just yesterday I was reviewing, we got a registration form from somebody who talked to us, I think 2 years ago, probably applied once or twice in the interim, got rejected, and now is thinking about working with us. He would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. So if you are not currently a client, we'd love to help you as we helped others for years. Again, go to the links I just provided. I'm going to provide them again. There you go. And think about engaging with us. Now let's turn back to the questions. I guess Esme, you're still here, so that's great.
Yeah, I have a few more minutes.
Okay. Do I need to get, for the follow-up from the question about changing jobs, do I need to get a recommendation letter from the new manager, or the manager from the old job would suffice?
In
other words, somebody changes jobs like now, okay? Like let's say January, February, starts a new job, applies round 1 of next year. Should he get a recommendation from the new manager who has been supervising him for about 6 months, or from the old manager who supervised him for 3 years, or perhaps both?
I would say the new manager probably doesn't know you as well. And so you will be fine getting your previous manager, and then maybe a previous recommendation, but then add an optional and say why you're not providing a letter from the current manager. So, you have to think that somebody that worked with you for 3 years would know you a lot more than somebody that worked with you for only 6 months. So it's absolutely fine. And I've seen admissions office going through with that if you don't have to provide, and schools would understand. The same is if you don't feel comfortable telling your new manager who just started the company there about leaving your plans for business schools just yet, and you feel that telling them so is going to jeopardize your chances at the company, then you just mention that in the optional essay and get the letter from your most recent manager before that.
Okay. Let's see.
I think I'm gonna go head out because
all right. I want to thank you again, Esme. You've been great.
Thank
you
you
for all your
and
contributions.
No problem. What I just want to say to all of you out there is if you have a question that didn't get answered, or maybe wasn't answered what you wanted to hear just because we didn't know all of the information that was behind it, feel free to use our email and let us know. And we have free consultations. We can answer those questions and let you know yes, no, whatever, and what, especially for that case. So just pick up the phone, just email us and say, that you want a free consultation, and you can do that at any time. Okay? And I'm going to head out.
All right. Thank you again, Esme. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Linda. Bye, Christy.
Bye.
All right. So we have an anonymous attendee asking, Christy, is the MBA really for career switchers? I have a non-traditional background, education, teaching, entrepreneur. I want a career change into consulting. that it seems like so many applicants from tech, consulting, investment banking, Fortune 500 companies. How do I explain or overcome this in the application?
That is an excellent question. And
Yeah, it is.
I would say that yes, the MBA is very good for career switchers, especially the 2-year MBA. I always liked people with non-traditional backgrounds because they bring a different point of view into the program. And no program actually wants to have an entire class full of either engineers or consultants or investment bankers or whatever it might be, because then you don't get lots of different points of view. What you have to be very careful of, though, is being able to explain what's transferable skills you can leverage going into whatever it is you want to go into. And you mentioned consulting from teaching. I had a student once who was a high school biology teacher, and she is now the vice president of Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. You can do great things with an MBA. It's the most useful degree you can ever get. But what transferable skills do you have? And that's the thing that you have to work on. Look back and say, what do I know how to do? What can I do? Why would a company want to hire me? Because the MBA can't do everything. It can give you a lot of knowledge, but you have to bring something to it. So that would be my advice.
I used to sometimes volunteer for Forte, and I love to do the non-traditional applicant table. They had like a round robin thing. I used to love I always ask, give me the non-traditionals. I love that. And one of the reasons I loved it because everybody thought they were non-traditional, and I didn't think they were non-traditional at all. But the other reason I loved it is because I came to realize that every applicant has to do 2 things in their application. They have to show that they fit in, and they have to show that they stand out. They have to do both, and that's somewhat contradictory. Christie, disagree with me. You're on the other side. I wasn't on the other side, okay? So the challenge for the people who are investment bankers and work for McKinsey and consultants and Fortune 500 companies, their challenge is to stand out. For the non-traditional, who really and truly is non-traditional applicant, the challenge is to show that they fit in. The school will recognize that you're going to bring a distinctive perspective and experience, much like the healthcare worker that we spoke to a few minutes ago. You're going to bring a distinctive perspective and experience to the class, and they're going to value that. What they're going to be concerned about is, can you handle the academics? Can you handle the quant demands? Do you have an appropriate goal? Well, the goal from what you said is appropriate. So when you do your application, and actually we have a resource that I think addresses your concern, not so much the fitting in and standing out dichotomy there or dilemma, is we have a resource for that. I'm going to post it in a minute, but realize that everybody has that challenge. Your challenge is going to focus on one part of it. Somebody else will focus on the other, but you have to do both. All right, so let me get that resource. And let me also pose the next question. Okay, so Avinash also has a question. I'm thinking of doing my MBA for the year 2020. Wait, what's the wrong question from him? Let me get the right one. Could you please provide success rate of students getting to MBA in top business schools? Well, for our clients, I'm assuming you're asking for acceptance clients, and frankly, it's right around 90%. Sometimes it's a little over 90%, it's a little under 90%, depending upon the year. But that's what it's been. That our clients are accepted at top MBA programs. Now, this is a very broad question. How is having a master's degree advantageous, and how do you show that in the application? Christie, that's a pretty broad one, like I said.
Yeah. Well, it would be advantageous if it has something to do with your future career goals and gave you added technical skills of some sort. If it's just something really random, it probably won't do much for you at all. I mean, it's there. It added to your knowledge, your wealth of knowledge, but it's really up to you to explain why you did it and how it has added to what you will bring to the school or what you might bring to a future company. So that's the thing you would have to work on.
Yeah, I think the key is showing that it's going to help you achieve a goal that you otherwise could not achieve. Yeah, that's the key. Resource on the chat window. Okay, it's out there. That was for the non-traditional applicant. Okay, and then we have another question. Am I late in applying for top B schools doing my MBA starting in 2021? Have you taken your test score yet, Avinash? Do you know what you want to do post MBA? I'll tell you what, you can answer that in the chat window. You're very welcome, John. That John was a non-traditional applicant. Okay. Xiaojing asked, how important are promotions when schools are reviewing work experience?
It definitely counts. You want to make sure that somebody has had progression in their job. A lot of people get hung up on the fact that, oh, well, I don't have 5 years of experience yet, or I don't have 4 years or whatever. But I've seen candidates with 10 years of experience in the same job. I'd rather have somebody with 3 years experience who's had a promotion or who has done something that was fairly outstanding and impacted the company in some way than someone who's had 10 years of experience doing the same job. So progression is important.
All right, I'll tell you what, I haven't heard back from Avinash on the questions I asked, which his question was, am I late in applying for a top B school for 2021? I'm going to, obviously, Christie, you can add to this. If you have a competitive GMAT score, a competitive GPA, and a clear post-MBA goal in your mind, as well as a good idea of the schools that you want to apply to round 2, then you are not too late. If you don't have those ingredients, you're probably going to be better off waiting until either round 3, which I don't necessarily recommend, especially since this is such a competitive cycle, or round 1 of next year. Christie, do you want to add to that?
I would say the exact same thing. And especially, Avinash, I'm going to assume, which I should not do, that you may be an international candidate.
Yeah.
And if so, you really have to apply by the January round in order to be able to get the visa documents that you'll need. And most schools will tell you that. But if you're
right, well, he did clarify one thing. He has not taken the GRE, the GMAT exam, and he's planning to do an executive MBA. So that changes the whole thing.
It does indeed, yes. Where the
Okay, go ahead.
MBA, no, the executive MBA, a lot of them actually have rolling admissions. So
yes. And a much later deadline.
Much later deadlines, exactly. So I don't think you're too late for executive, no.
Right, and some of them don't require the GRE or the GMAT at all, and some of them will accept the executive assessment, which is supposed to be a somewhat easier exam and more appropriate for the executive MBA. So you are not late at all. Thanks for that additional information.
Changes the picture.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. Anonymous attendee. I'm applying for the same schools as my coworker, who is also my co-founder for a social initiative we started. We are in different technical disciplines, though. Will we be judged in the same buckets by the school?
No, you'd be judged independently of each other. They may not, depending on what schools you're applying to and how many candidates they have in the application pool, they might not even figure out that you're in the same firm. So, but you would be judged according to the rest of the candidate pool.
And realize, I mean, while your work experience at this point in time might be quite similar, your background could be very different. Maybe you went to different schools, maybe you have different interests and hobbies. That would definitely be major factors in reviewing your application, even if they do realize that you work at the same place. Okay. All right, and with that, one last question. This is from Nadanya. I'm mispronouncing the name here. Do business schools in general have an issue with the civil servants, or applicants from non-governmental organizations?
No.
No. Okay.
As long as you've got some sort of transferable skills and the ability to do the quant work in the program, absolutely not.
All right, so at this point, we're going to bring this to a close. And at this point, I actually have a question for all of you, and I'm wondering if you can help me out with this question, okay? We've been on this Q&A or Ask Me Anything for almost an hour and a half. I don't know how long Christie can still stay. I have a little bit more time, and we've answered your questions, and you're clearly interested in what we have to say. So for those of you who are not yet clients or not planning to become clients, could you let me know what's causing you to hesitate about engaging with us one-on-one, where we can really help you? You can put in the question window or the chat window. I prefer the chat, but it doesn't really matter. Anybody want to share that? It would really help us to know. Okay, nobody wants to share that? Up here comes, mainly the cost. Okay, well, we do have something new that can help with the cost. And that is we now have a firm on the site, and depending upon how much you spend, you can get up to 36 months to pay, which is something that we just couldn't provide previously. Getting some wonderful feedback from John. This was the most helpful discussion I've been a part of in my 3 years of research, whereas I was not inclined. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that feedback, John. Again, I'm starting to consider paying for it now. Thank you so, John. That's great news. And by all means, as Esme said earlier, sign up for a free consultation. Be more than happy to talk to you. All right, let's see. So in terms of the cost, as I pointed out before, the cost of our services can be far less than the cost of rejection. Far, far less. So when it's very easy to see the cost of our services. It's much less easy to see the cost of a rejection during a very competitive cycle, I might add. Mm-hmm. And as Esme and Cindy and Christie all said at the very beginning, when we asked how can you best deal with the competitiveness, it's optimize your applications. Make sure you're answering the questions. Make sure you're answering them coherently and intelligently. So again, there's a cost-benefit analysis that I think has to go on. And we did just add a firm to the site, which can allow you to pay over time. Okay, that's the big advantage of it. Now, I'm so pleased to hear that you're thinking of paying for it now, John. That's great news. We'd love to work with you. Be delighted to work with you. And again, as you heard, Christie and Esme both have extensive experience with military. All right, Anushka wrote, I have drafted out my essays, have a clear view of my future goals, but don't have my GMAT yet, so I'm not sure about round 2 or round 3 and don't want to spend yet. But Jamie Wright has been so helpful with all my queries despite my concerns. That's wonderful feedback too, thank you. And Xiao Jing says, are there anything that Accepted does differently than other admissions consultants? There are a few things that are distinctive about Accepted. One is that I think we're one of the oldest in the business. I don't mean just our age. I mean the time we've been in business. And I think that says a lot for the service that we provide. That's one thing. The other thing is there are many consultancies that have one person meet with you, another person edit your essays, another person do your resume, another person do interview prep, another person proof. We don't do that. We do have peer review. So a subset of your essays will be reviewed by somebody else, but you work consistently with the same person who becomes expert in your story and really develops a relationship with you and learns a lot about you and helps you tell that story effectively, both in your essays, in your resume, and in your interview. I think it has enormous advantages. One of our Accepted clients, one of Esme's clients actually, was admitted to a program that before starting had to do a 360-degree review of them, asked somebody to do a 360-degree review. And this one client who had been somewhat of a difficult client for Esme actually came to her and said, other than my wife, you know me better than anybody else. Could you please do it? So that kind of relationship and that kind of, and that insight that we glean into your story helps us help you tell it. Okay, I think that's one of those two things, the level of experience as a company, and I think you saw the level of experience that the individual consultants have. Right? So I think those are things that are all very distinctive about Accepted. Did I answer your question, Xiaojing? You're very welcome, Maranya. And again, I apologize for mispronouncing names. You're very welcome. Okay. In that case, again, I want to thank you for your answers to my questions. Oh, no problem. All right. Well, thank you very much, Rania. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention, your time, your questions, and for sticking through to the very end. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Christy, again, for all your participation, your great answers. Okay, Xiaojing, we look forward to talking to you. And John also. All right, take care, everybody. Good luck with your applications. Christy, thank you again. Take care.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much for having me. Thanks, everybody, and good luck.
Bye-bye.
Bye.